Today we're going to look at dividing a decimal by a whole number. And as you can see, I've got one and I've got two. These aren't two examples. This is going to be two scenarios we're going to look at. The first scenario we're going to look at is when our dividend is already a decimal. Okay. So when that happens, that means that I'm dividing a whole number. So our first problem, we're going to divide 17 into a decimal. And that decimal is going to be 78 and 2/10. Okay. When you are dividing with a decimal, it is going to be much the same as addition and subtraction when it comes to the placement of the decimal. In division, you are going to line up the decimal in your answer as it is in the problem. So your decimal just rides the little elevator straight up to the roof and sits right above it, okay? And just like we did with whole numbers, we're going to use our benchmark numbers, okay? So I'm going to find for 17. But one of the things that we're going to do is we're going to separate, after you get that decimal up there, I want you to separate the whole number from the decimal. So when you're doing your benchmark numbers, I want you to consider 78, not 782. Okay, so that will limit how far you need to go. So 1 times 17 is 17. 2 times 17, remember, if you're not sure, you can break it into its expanded form. Doubling each, you get 20 and 14. Together, that makes 34. 3 times 17, you could add, okay? So we know that that is 11, and we carry the 1, so 51. All right, you could do 4 already. We can just double the 3, which is 6, and double the 4, which is 8, 68. 5, 10. So to find 5, remember, we find 10, which is 170. And now we're going to take half of that. So 170, we're going to take half. If you don't know what half of 70 is, you can break it down into 10 and 60. You can just subtract 10, take 10 away, and now you have an even number. So you know that it's 5 and 30, and we know half of 100 is 50. And together, all that makes 85, okay? And we can see if all we're looking for is 78, 5 becomes too much, all right? So where we're going to start, obviously 10 is too much. So we're going to start up here at 4, and we're going to put 4. Now, 17 will not allow for me to distribute 7 10s into every group. So I need to make sure that 0 is going in my answer. What I'm putting 4 of is 4 1s in every group. I'm looking at 78 1s. I exchanged those 7 10s for 71s, added it to the 8 I had to make 78 1s. And when I do, I'm going to subtract the 68 and I get 10. Okay? When I get 10, 10 is less than 17. So I have to bring down, and I need to exchange these 10s now for tenths. Right now I have 10 1s. That's not enough. So I'm going to exchange those for tenths and turn them into 100 tenths. And I'm going to add that to the 2 I already have to make 102 tenths. So when I'm looking at my list, now I can go past 4. I can go down to as much as 5 tenths. Okay, and I can subtract 85. And when I do, notice this goes to 9. 12 minus 5 is 7. 9 minus 8 is 1. Well, I see I can put another tenth in every group. This is tenths, so this goes above the tenth. If you need to keep it separated, draw a little line right here. You can't move to the next place until you've brought down. I'm still using those tenths that I started with. So if I put one more tenth in every group, I subtract 17 and I've used everything. So the answer is going to be 4 decimal. I put 5/10 in every group, plus another 1/10 to be 6/10. Okay, so that's the first scenario. The second scenario that we're going to look at today is going to be when our dividend is a whole number with a remainder. Okay, we talked about this in whole numbers. There were 4 things that you could do if your division problem resulted in a remainder. Those were: you could focus on that remainder, meaning that was your answer. You could ignore it, or you could round. And the last one is what we're going to look at today. That fourth option was you could change it into a fraction or a decimal. Today we're going to look at changing it into a decimal. So we're going to divide 88 into 396. Okay. And just like I did before, I'm still going to use benchmark numbers. Ten, of course, would be 880. Half would be a 4. Half of 8 would be 4. Up here, 88. If I want to break it apart, double would be 160. Plus another 16 makes 176. Okay, so I can see that right now 5 is going to be too much for this part. So 2 is not quite enough. So let's look at what happens if I put in 3. Remember, we can go ahead and we can come up with 3. We can add 88 and 176. We would get 14. Carry a 1, you would get 16. Carry another 1, and you would get 264. Or I can go ahead and find 4, doubling 176. So that would be 200. It may be easier for you to do it this way. Plus 2 70s is 140. Plus 2 6s make 12. Altogether, that would give you 352. Okay, is everyone following where I got this? I just doubled each one in its expanded form: 100 to 200, 70 to 140, and 6 to 12, and then put it all together. So I can see that my starting point is going to be 4. Okay. Now, if you don't want to do that, you can start with 2. You would just need 2 2s in the end, okay? I cannot break 300s. I got to exchange them for 10s. I cannot break 39 10s into 88 groups, so I exchange it for 1s. So my answer is above the 1s place, okay? And that's very important, because in a minute we're going to add a decimal, and I need to make sure that that decimal is directly behind that 4. So I'm going to subtract 352. And when I do, I get a remainder of 44. Okay? Now, in the past, depending on the problem, we would do something with this remainder. Today, what we're going to do is we're going to exchange these 44 1s for 440 tenths. And so the minute I add that decimal and 0, I add a decimal to my answer, because I can add a decimal and as many zeros as I need to finish this problem out. And you can see that 440 is 88 times 5. So I'm talking about putting 5 tenths in every group, which is 440 tenths, which now leaves me with no remainder. So let's work on a couple of examples.